Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to create a dynamic texture in Blender. Now this effect allows you to put a texture on your objects, and whenever they collide and come together, they'll complete the shape or the image. I learned how to do this, or at least I got inspired to do this by watching a tutorial from Grayscale Gorilla. That's this guy here, Nick Campbell, who did this in Cinema 4D. So I was just trying to figure out how to do it in Blender, and this is what I came up with, what I've just shown you guys here. So I'm just going to show you how to do that in Blender essentially. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial.
Now, just a quick note before you begin this tutorial, head over to blender.org and download a build version of Blender because that's what we'll be using in this tutorial. So you just go to blender.org, click the download button in the menu here, scroll down and hit this download experimental builds button. Now, the reason I'm using a build version of Blender is that it offers different options which you wouldn't normally get in a Blender download. So go ahead and click on download experimental builds and choose whichever one runs on your machine. Like I'm on a 64-bit machine, so I'll click this option. So yeah, that's what we'll do before we begin this tutorial.
We'll start by changing our render engine to cycles. The next thing we'll do is to unwrap this cube. So go over to your right hand panel and open the UV image editor. We do that by clicking and dragging down these corner arrows. Change the editor to UV image. Hit Tab on your keyboard to switch into edit mode. Make sure all the sides are selected. When they are all selected, or at least when a side is selected, it will highlight with an orange color. Press U on your keyboard and choose Smart UV Project. Leave the settings at default and press OK. We can go ahead and close our editor. We do that by clicking and dragging down these corner arrows. Hit Tab on your keyboard to switch back into object mode. We're going to add a material to this cube. We're not going to make any changes to it as we'll be doing that later. We're adding the material now because we will duplicate these cubes and we want them to look the same. Go into your Material tab. Hit the Use Nodes button. The next thing we'll do is to add a rigid body. This will enable this cube to behave dynamically. The physics will start acting on it as soon as we apply the tag. So go into your Physics tab. Choose Rigid Body. Leave the settings as they are at their default. Next, we will array this cube. Look for this wrench icon. That's where we'll add our modifier. Make sure your cube is selected and choose Add Modifier Array. Adjust the X offset to about 1.3. Next, we're going to dial up the count to about 8. The next thing we'll do is to add a flow. We're going to use a plane for our flow, and we'll add some physics properties to the flow itself. Go ahead into a create panel. Choose plane. We'll rename it to flow. While the flow is still selected, hit S on your keyboard and drag out. Make sure the space you're covering is more than the space occupied by the cubes. So just make it as big as you can. Now with the plane still selected, go ahead and press G and then Z to restrict the movement to the Z axis, then move it down. Now if we hit play in our timeline, we can see how the cubes will interact with the flow. As you can see, they're falling right through the flow. It's as if it doesn't exist. We need to add a physics property to this flow. So go over into your physics tab and choose rigid body. This time, we'll adjust the type and change it to passive. Now when we play our animation, you'll find that the physics are now accurate. For our next step, we'll go back to the cube and add 2 additional arrays. So go ahead and click cube in your outliner and go into the add modifier settings. You can minimize the first array so that we can focus more on the one we're about to add. So go add modifier and choose array. This time we're going to change the Y offset. We'll change back the X offset to 0. We'll change the Y offset to about 1.6. And now we'll increase the count to about 4. I think I'll add one more. So now we have 5 array objects from the first cube we made. The next thing we'll do is to add another array. So minimize the second array and go to add modifier array. This time we'll change the X and the Y offset to 0. Now we'll change the Z offset to 1.6. We'll increase the count to 3. Now go ahead in your timeline and play the animation. You will see that the cubes are staying together. So our next step will involve breaking them up. But before we do that, go ahead into all your arrays and click apply. It's a good idea to start from the top going down, as Blender will notice the change more accurately. Hit the tab key to switch back into edit mode. Then hit P on your keyboard and choose Buy Loose Parts. You will notice in your outliner that this has split the cubes into individual objects. Go ahead and hit play on your keyboard and see how it looks now. Now, you will notice that the cubes are behaving strangely. It's as if there's a wind pushing them around, or they are attracted to some kind of weird magnet. That's because the cubes don't know where the center of mass is. It's still trying to figure out where to balance the cubes from the point where they were joined together and to how they are now. So in order to change that, make sure all the cubes are selected and go over back into your object mode by pressing the tab key. Go Object, Transform, and choose Origin to Center of Mass. Now if you play back in our timeline, you'll see that you get a more accurate look. That is what we want for these cubes at the moment. It's looking good. Our next step will be adding a camera, the lights, and then we'll go over and configure the material. We'll start by deleting the camera that's already in the viewport. So go over to your outline and locate it. Just right click and delete. We'll go into the Create tab and choose the camera. Now we will navigate freely in the viewport to a point where we can see the cubes from above. I'm turning around by holding down the mouse wheel. To pan, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and navigate using my mouse wheel. By holding it down, I can easily pan around the viewport. If you're happy with your view, go ahead and press Ctrl-Alt-0. This will align the camera to your current view. Now I'm going to change the camera from Blender's default one. I'll change mine to a Canon 1100D. Feel free to choose whichever one of these options. So the next thing I'll do is to adjust my camera's sensor width so that I can get more cubes to show up in my view. Go ahead and dial this figure up as much as you think you'd need. That's looking okay. Now I can scrub back in my timeline and play the animation one more time. That's looking great. The next thing we're going to do is to add the material. Go ahead and open the node editor window. Click on any one of the cubes to see what the material looks like at the moment. Right now our material is just set to a plain white. You can also see it in the preview window. So we're going to change the surface to principled. The next thing we're going to do is to add an image texture. So go ahead to add texture and image texture. Connect the color to the base color. We do that by just clicking and dragging and connecting them. We'll also change our view in the render view here to material. Now we'll add our image. Go ahead to open, locate your image and choose open image. If you can't find your image through this option, you can just go ahead and drag it in this window. Blender will automatically locate it, and then all you need to do is to select it, then edit. For our next step, we're going to go into edit mode. Select the sides of each and every one of the cubes and then project the texture. Now we'll begin to project our texture. We'll start by selecting any of these cubes which are currently in the camera view. Make sure you stay in the camera view during this projection because the image will look differently depending on which side you're looking at it from. So I'll start by selecting any of these cubes. I've chosen this one, and I'll hit tab to switch into edit mode. Now I'll hit the A key so that I can select all the sides of my cube. Now hit U and then choose project from view. You'll notice that there's some options which come up on the left hand side. So you should make sure that camera bounce is checked and also clip to bounce. This clip to bounce option will prevent the image from repeating itself. We'll just have one central image if you choose this option. So we're going to repeat this for the rest of these cubes. So I'll choose any run. I'll start from the top going down so that I don't lose my direction. I'll hit tab, make sure all the sides are selected, U, and then project from view. I'll go on to the next one, tab, make sure all the sides are selected, U, then project from view. This process can be a bit time consuming, so I'll come back at a later time when I've finished projecting the texture on all of these cubes. This is what we have after projecting the texture. This whole process could have been a lot easier if we had an add-on that would allow us to select all of the cubes while in edit mode. There's an add-on called Multi-Edit, but the only problem I found with it was after selecting and applying all the textures, when replaying the animation, the image would not come out to be a full image in the viewport as we're seeing it right now. So in short, the Multi-Edit add-on would be great if you're working for a still image. But if you're going for an animation which has physics enabled, this add-on will most likely not work for you. Now we'll move on to our lighting. So we'll switch into object mode by pressing the tab key. And then we're going to change the viewport shading to solid. Now we can move out of camera perspective by pressing 0. And then we're going to bring in our 3-point light setup, which I made for you guys. So we're going to import the softbox comp that's in there. So let's just get to doing it. We'll go File and then Append. This will open up the options for you to choose the file which you downloaded. In this case, it's this one which says 3-point softbox setup.blend. So click on it once and then locate this folder which says group. Click on that once as well and then choose this which says softbox_comp and just go append. I really wish I could make an add-on, but I don't even know how to do that. So this is the only way I found which I could share this thing. So the next thing we'll do is to scale this up by pressing the S key and dragging out. So we want it to be bigger than our cubes here, and that's okay. And then we'll go into top perspective by pressing 7 first, and then just press G to move this central point, this little orange dot right in the middle of our cube heap here. So go G and then Just move that there and then left click to confirm. Now I think we need to move this down some more, so we're going to press G and then Z to restrict the movement to the Z axis while dragging down. G, Z. I've put a little cube marker. I don't know if you can see that. This little cube here, so it's just there to help you position this correctly. So press G, Z, and leave it there. So I'm going to switch back into camera perspective by pressing 0 to see what we have. Change the viewport shading to rendered. Let's see what we have. It's not bad at all. I think at the moment the lights are too bright. Or maybe it's my exposure from my color management. That's another thing we need to change. We need to go into our color management and change it to Filmic. There's a guy called Enterprise from Blender Guru. He goes into how to use the Filmic settings to get a more appealing or realistic image. So we'll go into the Scene tab here and locate the color management. Change the view to Filmic, and there you go. You can see straight away that the scene has changed quite a bit, and I'll play around with this exposure and gamma values here and see what we can get, if we can get closer to the look we're going for. I think that's looking good. Maybe a bit more exposure, and I think that's looking really good. Now that all our lights and colors management has been set up, you can feel free to replay the animation and sort of make some final checks to the lighting and the shadows, but I think mine is looking great, so we'll go straight ahead to rendering this out. Now we'll start to change our render settings. So navigate to your render tab here, which is this little camera icon. We'll change the dimensions to HD 720. That will give us a 1280 by 720 resolution. Frame rate, we'll leave it as it is at 24. And you can define your output folder because this is where those files are going to be saved, so you need to do that as well. I've already defined mine, so just make sure you put it in a place you remember. We'll leave these settings the way they are, and we'll change this file format to TIFF. By default it's set to PNG, so I've already changed mine to TIFF, so you do the same for yours. And we'll also add the samples from, we'll change it from 128 to 500, so you get yours showing the same as mine, 500. Once you're done doing that, I think there's nothing more to change. Just make sure your frame range is set from frame 1 and ending at whatever number of frames you've given your animation. And that's all. You can go ahead and press the animation button and it will start rendering. So after mine is finished rendering, I'm going to move the files into After Effects, where we'll apply a bit more color to the video and also to just try and make those reflections pop a little bit more. Here we are in After Effects. Now just a quick thing to note, I'm not going to use the files we just rendered. That's because I didn't want to have to go through rendering the whole animation when I've already got the files. So you might notice a few differences in terms of the image dimensions and also the file format I rendered, but it won't affect anything that you've already got. So I'll start by locating the folder where my images were saved. And I would like to drag this folder as it is without opening it, so I'll just drag it straight into After Effects. And right there you see it's made the sequence. And like I said before, if you notice in the tutorial I showed you that we rendered it at 1280 by 720, but my previous render was actually 960 by 540. So it won't really change anything, but I'm just making a note of that. So I'm going to drag it straight into the composition tab here, and then I'm going to play it just to see if everything rendered out properly. And that's looking okay. So the first effect I'm going to apply is for this reflections to pop. So I'm going to go into the effects and presets and choose and type in glow. I'm going to drag it right over the comp, and as you can see it's still too bright, so we need to turn that down by increasing this glow threshold. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So it was kind of like that. I'm turning it down a little bit, at least about 95 is okay, 95%. And I also turn down this glow radius. I'll turn it down to about 5, and the glow intensity, I think about 0.5 is okay. So just by turning that on and off, we'll get to see what kind of effect it's adding to our animation here. So it gives it a nice subtle glow, which is what we want, especially when these cubes start falling. You see that it's more appealing that way. Get nice shimmering there. So we'll close that, and then we're going to add the curves. This is what we're going to use to make our color adjustments. I'm just going to adjust the red first. Just sort of bring it up a little bit more, so it kind of picks up this flow. And I'll just pull down this green. You can pretty much adjust it however you want. It's just to create more interest to your video. I think I'll leave mine at that. Next thing I'm going to add is a little vignette. So we can do that by going to, is it layer? Yeah, look at this. Yeah, it's layer, new, then solid. So I'll keep all the settings as they are. I'm just going to make it black and go OK. And I'm going to mask it using the ellipse tool. So I'll just drag over it. For the masking, what you're just trying to do is to get the most interesting part on the inside of this ellipse. So I'll invert that, and then I'm going to apply a feather to this. So I'll press F on my keyboard and then just adjust these values. I'll feather it out as much as I can, and then I'm going to take down the transparency. So I'll hit T to bring out the opacity, and then I'm going to take it down a lot. I want it to be there, but not as visible as it was just now. So I think that's okay, because you don't want it to be obvious that you put a vignette on it. You want it to be subtle. So I'll put mine to about 20. And again, if we turn it on and off, we can see how it's affecting everything. Right. From here, I think that's all the adjustments I'll be making. You can feel free, obviously, to add as many adjustments as you want. Maybe you might want it to glow a little bit more, or maybe you want to put some kind of old retro effect on it. It's really up to you from this point. So I'm going to render this out. So I'll do that by pressing the shortcut. I think it's Control Shift /. Yes, that's the shortcut. So that's Control Shift /, and oh, it's /. I don't know what to call it, but we'll go ahead and check out. Click on lossless here. Now the options that I have in After Effects, usually people want to go for something like AVI or QuickTime, so I'll just leave mine at AVI and render it out that way. Obviously, if you want to change, or if you want more options like H264 for YouTube and all that, you can easily click this Q in Adobe Media Encoder here, and you can change that here because you don't get that option in After Effects CC. So you can feel free to do that. As for the output, I'll just define whichever folder I'm going to save it at, and that's where it'll go, and you can start rendering. So I'll come back at a later time when I've finished rendering this. Now I apologize for the lag in this video that you're currently looking at. That's just because I made a screen recording of it and it was kind of jittery, but the original video is not moving at that speed. So I've included the project files and the link is in the description. If you download the .blend file that I put in there, you can easily just replace the image which I've been using in the Blender in Blender, and you can have your own image just quickly applied without having to apply the texture. As you will find in the tutorial, takes quite a bit of time. And the whole point of this tutorial is just to share with you how to get a dynamic texture in Blender. And so just enjoy the tutorial, and please feel free to comment in the description, in the comment section, and I'll try my best to answer your questions.